Welcome. I thought I would make this video live instead of coming on, just making a different post. So, I have a couple things I want to talk about. Haven't been making consistent content. If you watch the channel introduction, you'll know that these videos are mostly just a library for me to collect my thoughts. So, first of all, Alright, well, I'm gonna go like this. Do me a favor and take a deep breath. Breathe in through your nose as deep as you can into your belly. And push out into your lower stomach. Now push into your back. Inside. And inside. And then let it go. And do it one more time. Breathe in through your nose. Hold. Push out. Back. Right. And left. All right. So, most of you guys don't know me, and I always assume that people kind of just know who I am and how I act, and a lot of times we take stuff like that for granted, who we are and who we think we are and who we know we are and how we show up and how we engage and interact, and for the most part, we look at this as who we are, and like I just said, you don't know who I am. If you do know who I am, blah blah blah, right? So there's this identification with form and presence, right? So for kids, right? Kids or animals, it's even better. Animals recognize their owners. Dogs do it by scent, but a lot of times it's just by feeling the energy. You know, people will say all the time like horses can feel energy and all this type of stuff, and they can't, right? And so when we show up in the form of energy, and then that energy takes form. And for the most part, so there's this idea of free will, and we like to think that we have free will. But for most of us, how we show up and how we engage with the world is pre-programmed. And we're at a point now in our culture where we talk about programming, and we talk about how you've been programmed and how you're in the matrix, and how nothing is real, and how you feel is a product of your own creation, and it's your responsibility ultimately to change or adjust, right? Based on how you feel or how others interact with you or engage with you. And we think we have control over this mechanism. And I would argue that if we did have control over this mechanism, that we wouldn't have drug addicts. I would argue that if we did have control over this mechanism, that we wouldn't have rapists, that we wouldn't have murderers, that we wouldn't have thieves, we wouldn't have politicians, we wouldn't have anything other than just a normal person that is changing themselves or morphing themselves to fit or mold their environment in or mold to their environment in a way that is not disruptive to the whole, right? And I've been looking at this for a long time because there's a word going around that is called neuroatypical. And it's funny because I think it's hilarious that people needed to come up with a term for that, because I don't think anybody is neurotypical. And I think that's the whole point of life, is understanding that all people are different. We are the same, but neurologically, personality, history, we're different. And appreciating those differences is what makes us more valuable as people, because when we appreciate the differences in somebody else, it shows us where somebody can complement us, right? And instead of trying to change somebody, right, we can appreciate the differences in another personality, and maybe they don't present things in a way that would be normally pleasing to our personality, but because we can appreciate differences, we learn to appreciate them. And this is talk, this is head talk, right? And the biggest issue with our world is we do head talk. We just, and nothing changes. And then we begin to lose respect for ourselves and others. And oftentimes we end up blaming other people, blaming ourselves, and just thinking that fault needs to be assigned somewhere. And personally, I grew up in an abusive household, so I was always doing what I could to change myself. And what I found is I could never quite do it. So eventually, what I've realized is I don't give a fuck anymore. And it took there was a very specific moment that I've realized that I didn't give a fuck. And it was at a point where at the time, my adopted mother went to hit me. And she hit me all my life up until then, and I just kind of took it. And something in me at this point in time, I think a lot of us don't understand this thing inside of us, and so something in me told me, no, like this is not gonna happen anymore. And so she went to hit me, and I grabbed her hand. And I just realized how much stronger I was than her. And I was like, yo, you're not gonna keep doing this. Like, you don't get to just do this to people. You don't get to just hit people when you want to hit them. And I think that's a point in everybody's life when they realize that, they do have some providence, some direction, and some will. But the issue comes when we think that this will is the thing that we can use to change ourselves. Because what we don't understand is this will chose this experience for a reason. And this is where I leave the physical and start to get metaphysical when I start talking about will and choosing and experience and all this type of stuff. But for me, what I believe is we choose to experience things so that we can understand them better. And I first discovered this on my first acid trip, where I took like 2,400 micrograms. It was like 12 doubles, so yeah, like 2,400 about that, 2,400 micrograms of LSD. And so that's a whole story for another video, but basically what I learned was this thing here is not what it seems. the pain here is not what it seems. The life here is not what it seems, and the experience here is not what it seems. And something else I learned is that I'm responsible for things, but not responsible in the way that I think I'm responsible. I'm not responsible for doing things or not doing things. I'm responsible for how I react or how I learn from them. So, if I get in an argument with somebody, I'm not responsible for ending the argument. I'm not responsible for not arguing. I'm not responsible for changing my opinion so that we don't argue anymore. What I'm responsible for is, did I learn something from this experience? Did my soul make progress in growth and evolution of consciousness through this experience? If it did, then it's beneficial. If it didn't, then I'll incur karma. And then I'll just have something else to learn from. And so for most of us, that's how the world works, like how it actually works. And eventually we go on to learn that our state of being, our consciousness, is actually what controls our experience. And so when you take this understanding and then you apply it to generally how you show up in life, you'll realize that for the most part, how you vibe is what you're going to experience. So whatever you're vibing with is what you're going to experience. And so if you're vibing with some awesome stuff, then chances are you'll experience that. If you're vibing with some negativity or you're feeling kind of low, chances are you'll find something else to experience that, or you'll find something to reinforce that experience. And ultimately what the purpose of this is to find value in yourself and to understand that just by nature of you being, you have value, and to learn that the value that you have is not just worth something to you, but there's a greater purpose for it. And then it's, what is that purpose, all this other type of stuff. But first, you need to understand that there's a value that you have, and it's inherent in you. And so, I think it's in the Declaration of Independence, basically the country declares that we are spiritual beings born with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, all of those things together are what inherently give us value. So because we're entitled to these things, it means that we have a life to live. We have things to learn, pursue, and experience. So if that's true, then why would you hold on to yourself or get on yourself about doing things that are wrong or bad or misinterpreting what somebody is saying, and then getting upset with yourself because you always do this or blah blah blah, right? Well, there's really no reason for that. And so for me, what I've learned over time is these things that I hold in myself are not me. And this is where like the New Age community starts to speak up, and they're like, yeah, that's stuff that's been implanted and programmed and all this other type of stuff. But they forget that we chose, this is now another level of metaphysics, we chose to embody these things so that we could heal them. So it's not that there are people out there and they're bad and they're doing things to us. It's that we chose to, for whatever reason, learn through an experience such as this, so that our soul on the other side of it will have a higher consciousness, will have a new thing, a new vantage point to look out from, basically. And so this is why at a lot of spiritual or Buddhist temples or stuff like that, they're up high, right? and you have to like hike to get there, or why people meditate on top of mountains and stuff. And the reason is because there's an experience that you're choosing to go through, right? The hike, right? Because on the other side of that, your consciousness, your inner being, knows that you're going to have a higher vantage point to look out from the top of the mountain, right? And so for us, what we need to do is, or for me, what I learned is the whole point of life is to be able to look up through that vantage point and then to see that there's another vantage point to look out from. To look, stand on top of the mountain, to look, see there's another peak that you haven't looked out from. And then we decide we're going to go on look out from that peak. And then everything else that is in this reality with us begins to co-create with us an experience to get us to the top of that peak. But the thing is it's not as simple as just getting to the top of the peak. You see, there are certain bridges that need to be crossed, monsters that need to be fought, bears that need to be avoided, right? Like swamps that need to be trudged through in the cavern, right? In the valley between the two mountains. And it's in this valley that we really figure out what we're not. And once we understand what we're not, we begin to realize who we are. And every time we do this, and as we successfully make our way up the mountain, this understanding of who we are becomes who we are. So it's not it becomes less of an understanding and more of an embodiment. And that's actually how we change. It's not recognizing that you're in a disagreement or an argument with somebody and realizing that you need to change your opinion, or understanding that you have a belief about something and this belief is keeping you away from something. These things are all great, but they're, from my perspective, when I look at it, it's all basic 101 stuff. It's very elementary. And the reason I say this is because, it's not about materialism in life. And I'm not saying materialism in life is not important, but what I'm saying is it's not about that. And so for me, just to give an example from my experience. So I haven't had an income, a stable income for like the last 4 or 5 months, right? So I'm an independent business owner, contracts, all that type of stuff. I build software products, and I haven't had a contract since June, right? So for me, I haven't had a stable income, okay? Haven't had money come in. Does this mean that this isn't going to work, or that I'm bad, right? Or that I'm no good at doing things? Well, obviously the answer to that is no, right? But the materialistic identification with things would say yes. And this is the problem, because we make things personal. We make everything personal. And as soon as we make things personal, it becomes less important. It just does. Whether it's how we feel, whether it's why we're doing something, it doesn't matter. Because the personal will is something that the personal will is something that needs to be honored and respected, but it also needs to be overridden at times. And I think for most of us, we don't understand this. And I think we think that life is based on how we show up and what we get out of it. And I think that's a very poor interpretation of what life is. You see, if you really look at like the experience of life and how you show up every day, and you take out your hopes and your dreams, and you take out your wants and your needs, and you just look at how you show up every day, generally what you'll find is, one, there's two options, right? So one, you'll either find a super helpful person who is just willing to basically help people as they need it, or do things that they see need to be done. So there's one type of person, right? And then there's another type of person who won't do anything, and who will see that things need to be done, but they'll wait on someone else to do it. And they'll expect that things will just get done, and that life will just happen, right? So we have these two types of people, and when you take, like, if you just take out hopes and dreams and all that type of stuff, you can kind of clearly see what type of person you are. And it's very simple and obvious, and this is the problem, is we start to think that all of this stuff, house, cars, money, job, siblings, kids, wife, husband, significant other, we begin to think this is who we are. Because we have this personal will wrapped around the experience that we show up in. And it's this thing that we learn in the valley to let go of. Because we realize that we're not the one making decisions. We're not, we don't even understand that we're not the one who chose this experience. And so we come into a paradox, because earlier I said we are the one, and then I said we're not the one. And you'll note that I also said it's the whole point of this is for consciousness and elevating and standing at peaks and looking out and seeing and understanding and then going down. Well, when you do this, your consciousness goes with you. And so it doesn't mean that you'll never be on top of that mountain again. You can think of it as maybe there's a part of you that is up there watching over you at all times, but the part of you that is experiencing, that's going down and in it, is actually the part of you that it's actually the part of you that isn't real. And it's because we have this amnesia that the real, so we, it becomes difficult because I think about things metaphysically, but humans think about things physically, right? And so as soon as you start thinking about things physically, the whole conversation changes, because it becomes about biology and personality. Well, personality is even a little metaphysical, but it becomes about biology and physiology, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think if you I think if you just take life at a physical perspective, there's a lot of things that end up being missed. And for some people, that's okay to live through. But I think for most of us, especially if you're watching this video, that's not sufficient. And so ultimately what I'm pointing at here is that there's two ideas that you identify with. And the one idea is the vantage point that can see everything. And the other idea is there's a part of you that goes through and grows through things. And these two things work together to create who you are. It's not just these two things. There's a whole orchestra or symphony that is pulling heaven and earth for you to detach from the lower emotions of the false self that you think you are, and to bounce or float from mountaintop to mountaintop. And there's another dichotomy, because in this world, in this dimension, in this reality, we think we have to go down there. And because we think we need to grow and experience these things. And that's not the only way. There's a better way. There is. And you don't have to change who you are to experience peace and bliss. I think that right there is probably the number one misbelief that most of us hold on to, is that peace cannot be found in who we are right now today. That there is some level of contortionism that needs to occur for us to experience our true being. Therefore, we climb the mountain. There is always a yogi or a master, an enlightened being in the valley. Just like there is always an enlightened being at the peak. The question is are you willing to see it and recognize it and own it and to show up as it? Because the fact of the matter is the world doesn't need another person to be scared to go down into the valley because they might experience things that they don't like, or they might see things that they don't like, and therefore they need to heal something in themselves. The world doesn't need that shit anymore. The world needs somebody who knows who they are wherever they are, and to show up as that wherever they are, regardless of the experience or the circumstances around them. That's what the world needs. It doesn't need you crying because you're experiencing something that you don't want to be experiencing, because you're somewhere you don't want to be. Definitely doesn't need you feeling sorry for yourself. The world will respond to how you show up. And yes, there are points in time where the world may try and pull you down, but even if it does, you can still hold your state of being regardless of your geographical location or your metaphysical location. And that's the thing. When the world tries to pull you down, it tries to pull you down in consciousness. When other people are trying to bring you down, they're trying to bring you down in consciousness. People talk about vibration, right? Vibrating high, vibrating, trying to lower your vibe, man. Not so much. Trying to take your consciousness and put it in a box and do this with it. Because the more you can do this with somebody's mind, the more you can control them. And I'm not saying we want to control each other, but I'm saying there is a tendency for us to feel the need to control things. And so we begin to box things in. And from there, all we can do is see our differences. Because we see separate things. Maybe you do know this, maybe you don't know this. Quantum physics, the physical way that subatomic particles interact with each other, has proven, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that there is nothing physical in this world. The physicality that we believe is real is the interactions of forces, four forces to be exact, on things. You have your strong force, you have your weak force, you have your electromagnetic force, and then you have your gravitational force. Strong force and weak force, they are actually pretty, both of them are they control the level of interaction at the subatomic level with those elementary particles. And so what I mean by that is strong force and weak force have, outside of the atomic bond, don't really have much interaction. The biggest forces that we pay attention to are electromagnetism and gravity. I'm sure you know what gravity is. I'm sure you know what electromagnetism are, right? But what we don't understand is these forces are the things that make this appear solid. And the way they interact with each other is the things that give them properties. So it's not that they have their own properties, it's that when they interact with each other, they have properties. Things come out of them, right? I used to tell people for the longest time, I'm a spiritual catalyst. I used to tell this to everybody that I met, because people would not understand why they get so triggered when they're around me. And I'd just be like, hey man, I'm just a spiritual catalyst. Just because I knew that the catalyst is the thing from chemistry that you need to create a reaction. And as a kid, I went around and I was always fucking with people. Always fucking with people. And a lot of times people would be like, man, you play too much. You play too much. You play too much. You never know when enough is enough, and blah, blah, blah. But you see, there's no such thing as too much. And there's no such thing as enough is enough. Because and this is like, this shit is not easy, okay? But it doesn't mean that it's not true, okay? So let's take that for a grain of salt. There is a way to experience life in a state of constant bliss. It's possible. And when you're in a state of constant bliss, if somebody's fucking around with you or testing you, you'll probably fuck around with them too. Like, you'll probably just end up having fun with them, right? And for the most part, most of us are not at that state. And so when somebody fucks with us, it becomes annoying. And we don't want it. We want to fight against it. And because we don't understand who we are, and we don't understand why we're here, and we don't remember conveniently, we let ourselves act in a certain way that is not beneficial to the whole. And I would argue that all of these actions that are arising from ourselves are really just here to get us to let go of what we think is right or what is wrong. And I think it's really trying to teach us what's beneficial and what's not beneficial versus what's right and what's wrong. And then I think beyond that, what we're trying to see is something beneficial to the self also beneficial to the whole. And I think a lot of us are stuck in that, where we're trying to understand it is what's good for me also good for others, and if it's not, does that make it bad? And it's this place that we find ourselves in, where we're all trying to understand, is what we're doing going to benefit the collective in the long run, or is this from a selfish motivation? Is this from a personal motivation? And even if it is this for me to judge myself about? Or is this for me to just let go and not care so much about it, right? Because we think that we need to adjust how we're showing up in the world. And I would say for a lot of us, yes, we probably do. But I think we know our intentions, and I think we know what we're trying to do. And I think it's this thing that we get confused, a lot of us, with the best interest, best intentions. We get this confused with value, with self-worth. And we think that if our intentions aren't followed through on, then our worth is lower. Or if our intentions are driven by something that we think is outside of us, we think that is bad. And so we begin to react to things that we think are outside of us, especially if we think that our own personal interest is more important than the whole. Especially if we think that our own personal opinions are more important than the whole. And we start to get lost, basically, in who we think we are. And we really, really, really forget the whole point. And so what I'm trying to say in all of these words is none of this is necessary. It doesn't need to happen. And actually, A Course in Miracles says you don't have to think about anything ever again. You don't have to worry about anything ever again. Actually, what you should do is you should take that thing you're worried about and you should offer it up as a sacrifice. Because the more you're thinking about, if you're thinking about this more than you're thinking about God, you're making it an idol. And I'm always conscious of how often or how early I mention God in my videos. And for the most part, I try to avoid it because the presence of divine is always here. But I know that the mention of the word can trigger the thing that I'm talking to. And so it's that dichotomy that I try to balance when I'm communicating these messages, right, and these experiences. And I would say that beyond all of these things that we struggle with and deal with in our life, there's a greater understanding to be seen and to be had. And I think as long as we stay focused on what's in front of us, we're not going to be able to see it. Because we forget why we're here. And we really think that, I don't know, man. I think we really think that there's a way that we can change things. And we don't understand that it's our thinking that created the problem. And Einstein said, a problem cannot be solved from the same level of thinking that created it. What he was talking about is consciousness. He said, problems cannot be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. It just can't. And if you're having a disagreement with somebody, going down to their level of consciousness to have a conversation with them isn't going to solve their problem either. So, I know a lot of times we know this stuff, and so I'm not trying to teach you anything anymore. I'm not trying to give you my will or my word or opinion or anything. I'm really just trying to communicate the stuff that I've been noticing showing up in my life, and the subconscious thoughts that I've noticed swirling around in my head that I haven't been able to get out, right? And the feelings and the emotions and the impressions and the intuitions and all of this stuff, and just realizing that none of this shit is me. None of it. And so a little mantra that I think is a good way to look at this is, for me, I'm the type of Christian that focuses on the good stuff in life. And I'm the type of person that focuses on the good stuff. I'm aware of the bad stuff, but I focus on the good stuff. What you focus on expands. So I try to focus on the good stuff, and I learned this at a young age. Nobody gave a fuck about me, okay? Nobody felt sorry for me. And when people did feel sorry for me, it was just pity. Nobody was gonna come and save me, okay? So what did I need to do? I needed to go to the fucking gym and get strong enough so that the next time somebody hit me, I could grab their hand and they wouldn't keep hitting me. I think there's things that we need to do in our life, and I think we don't even know that we're doing them. I think it's just happening for us. And I think the more that we look at this, the more we'll understand that, man, this is not about us. This is not about us at all. This is not about an individual person with trauma and pain and remorse and regret and all this stuff. It's not about it, man. It's not. It's not. And the more you make it about that, the more you suffer in life. So, hope this helps. My name is Riley. God bless you. Namaste.